Hey guys, welcome. How's it going? Glad to have you guys here. Looks like some of you guys were already waiting. I was about a minute late, so sorry about that. But glad to have you guys here. Hey Scotland. Hey Josh. Elena. It's good to have you guys all here. Okay, well, let's not waste any time. Oh, hey Chloe, how's it going? Let's get started, all right? Let me make sure I get my notes up. It's good to see you too. All righty. Okay, so let's review a little bit about what we learned last time. Last time we learned how the Christian church was divided into the Western and Eastern empires. Christianity was still relatively new at the time, and that many people had alternative or different beliefs. So that's kind of what we just learned about in the last chapter. And in chapter 4, what we're going to learn is we'll read about the life and work of one person in the Western Roman Empire who was devoted to Christianity. So we're going to learn about a certain individual. It's good to have you guys all here, Chloe. The blue thing is just it's a piece of cloth. It's a piece of, um, yeah, that's basically it. Um, it's just to block out what's going on behind, if people need to walk, because I'm just at my house, so if people need to walk behind me, that's what it's for. It is snowing outside, so that is pretty exciting. All right, so any other comments that you guys need to make before we get started? Because once we start the lesson, remember, we need to keep all of our comments in the chat focused on the lesson, all right? And then after the lesson, we could talk about other things. That's cool. It's snowing in Albuquerque as well. Yeah, the snow is awesome. I really love the snow too. Okay. All right, let's get started, okay? Chapter 4, prayer and work. Okay. So our primary focus objective, so things that we need to be focused on, is our big question, which I'll bring up in a second, uh, and three other things that we need to focus on. We're going to learn about Saint Benedict and his life. We need to learn we're going to learn how to describe his life and works, and identify specific ways in which he changed how religious communities worked. We'll be able to describe life inside a monastery. So we're going to learn about monasteries and what life was like inside a monastery. And then again, just like usual, we'll understand the meaning of our chapter vocabulary words. And don't forget, you can get extra credit in history by taking one of the core vocabulary words and submitting a sentence using one of the vocabulary words under this lesson on Canvas, right? So when you came to the lesson on Canvas, you could click on it to watch the video, but then also below you could submit a text entry box, and that way you can put a uh, a sentence using one of the vocabulary words. Oh, so Chloe, I'm glad that you did one of the chat commands. I don't have the chat commands up for this lesson. All right. Um, I am trying to get ahead. This week's going to be a little bit busier than usual, and so I'm doing basically all of my lessons for this week today, so that you guys can watch them on the appropriate day or watch them all tomorrow if you want to. Because we just have a lot of training and stuff. But I'm really glad that you wanted to use that chat command. That's really awesome. So thanks, Chloe. But as we go through chapter 4, we'll see the core vocabulary words. We'll understand the meaning, and then you can pick out one for your sentence if you want to do so. Okay. So let's call attention to the big question. All right. The big question. How did Saint Benedict's ideas help people in Europe during the Middle Ages? So as we read, look for answers to answer the big question of how Saint Benedict's ideas helped Europe and people in Europe during the Middle Ages. Yep, I will be going to school tomorrow. Yep, Tuesdays and Fridays I go to school. Okay. So we just read the big question. How did St. Benedict's ideas help people in Europe during the Middle Ages? All right, so look for answers to that question as we read. Okay, so let's start reading and make sure you follow along with me, right? Read with me. So, chapter 4, Prayer and Work. St. Benedict of Nursia, just about the time of the fall of the Western Roman Empire, a boy named Benedict was born in the mountain village of Nursia, northwest of Rome. He was a very serious child who thought a lot about right and wrong. He was described as having the mind of an old man and a young man's body. So maybe that means he was really mature at a young age. Some of you guys are very mature as well. Let's look at this picture, right? Here is the Abbey of Saint Antimo near Siena, Italy. And they followed the rules of Saint Benedict. So we're going to learn about Saint Benedict and how he, changed Europe during the Middle Ages. And this looks like a monastery, Saint Abbey. And then also on the thumbnail for this video is another picture of a monastery. There is a test at the end that will be at the end of the quarter covering all of this stuff, all right? Yep. Thanks, Scotland, for helping me and helping others stay on track, all right? I don't mind the test question. That obviously knowing that there's a test will help you want to stay focused more. If there wasn't a test, you could just be like, well, what's the point, of really learning this if I'm not going to be tested about it? It's fun stuff and it's very informative and it, is really cool. And if you guys continue to study this stuff, it'll be very beneficial, but then it'll also prepare you for your test. All right, so let's continue to read at the top of page 26. Bennett's parents sent him to Rome to study, but the lying, cheating, and dishonesty he saw in the city upset him. He left Rome and decided to live as a monk, devoting himself to religious life. At that time, there were many monks in Asia, but there were very few of them in Europe. The European monks who did exist lived isolated from the world, alone and away from all other people. All right, so that gives us a little bit about a monk. So let's go back up. And monk is a vocabulary word for chapter 4. And what does that mean? Let's look over here to the right. A monk is a religious person or a member of a religious community of men who promise to live very simply. So living isolated and alone from other people. Let's look at this picture really quick. This is Benedict's good works and holiness made him one of the most important saints of the Catholic Church. All right, so continue to read about monks, starting right here. They denied, sorry, let me pull the chat back up. They denied themselves comforts of life for religious reasons. Many of them did things that were harsh and painful to themselves. They went without food or lived in a cave for years on end. This is what Benedict did at first. He spent 3 years living in a cave by himself. Eventually, Benedict decided that it was not enough to pray alone in a cave. He believed that monks should serve God and people. Gradually, Benedict became known as a holy man. A group of rich and influential monks invited him to become the leader of a monastery. All right, so we're learning that Benedict was mature at a young age, and that as he grew up, he decided to become a monk because he wasn't very happy and pleased with how things were being run in the city. He said there was lying and deceiving and cheating, and so he became a monk. And then he went and lived in a cave for a while, but then decided that that wasn't really enough to just live alone in a cave. So he wanted to start serving people, and he became a very influential monk and started to become a leader of a monastery. And this is our next vocabulary word. A monastery is a place where a community of monks live. And then down here is a little picture of some medieval monks or nuns who spent a lot of time praying. So a lot of monks will live in a monastery. All right, so after we finish this page, I do have a question for you. The question is, what ideas did Benedict present in his book, The Rule of the Saint Benedict? All right, so we're about to read about his book titled Rule of Saint Benedict, and what are some ideas that he presented in this book? Okay, so let's read about that. Um, that's going to be in this next section, but let's finish this first section on page 27. So Benedict accepted, but things did not go very well. When Benedict tried to get the other monks to serve God by helping other people, they refused. The situation became so hostile that some of the monks even tried to poison Benedict. Whoa. Hey guys, let's try to keep all chat focused on what's going on, right? There was a lot of okays being spammed, and then there's a bunch of these houses. I can time you out if you're saying stuff that isn't going along with this lesson, right? And timing you out means you can't type in the chat. So if you have questions, I won't know because you'll be timed out, all right? So let's stay focused. I like that you guys are trying to be interactive. I really appreciate that. But let's just keep all things in chat. Either questions about what we're reading, answers to the question that I just said. Can anybody repeat the question that I just said? Was anybody paying attention? Hmm? Oh no, I don't know if anybody was paying attention to the question that I'm about that I was going to ask you guys. I was giving you the question in preparation to be able to answer the question, but it doesn't look like anybody was paying attention. And that is sad. Okay? This is school time right now, okay? It's awesome to have you guys here, and I know that you're on the computer and at home or somewhere else, not in a school classroom, but it's time to be focused, okay? This lesson won't take very long if we all stay focused. Okay. So the question is going to be about a book that Benedict wrote called The Rule of the Saint. And as we read this next section on page 27, look for ideas that Benedict presented in this book, okay? So Benedict saw that to put his new ideas into practice, he would have to start his own monastery. He moved to the town of Monte Cassino and wrote a book that is known today as The Rule of Saint Benedict. This book contains a list of rules to be followed in the monastery. Benedict did not ask people to seek holiness by going without food and water. Instead, Benedict asked monks to find God in ordinary, simple, and useful work. Work was balanced with praying and reading, sleeping and eating. He also emphasized the importance of working together and getting along with everyone else in the monastery. Okay, so what are some ideas that Benedict presented in his book, The Rule of Saint Benedict? What are some ideas that we just read? And were these ideas new and different from what religious practices were before? I'm pausing. Am I pausing anybody else? Is it my internet? Should be good. Like my microphone is pausing? No? Okay, so what were some of the ideas that he had? You guys are good at answering. If I was a pausing, you guys are good at answering that question, but no one can answer the question about the rule of the saint. Well, these were new ideas, all right? Some of the older ideas were painful, right? Some people had to do some painful things, go without food and water, live in a cave all by themselves. They weren't very happy with one another in the monastery. But his new ideas were balanced with prayer, or was to live life balanced. Work and life should be balanced with prayer and reading, sleeping and eating. He also emphasized about creating a community where everybody gets along. So there were some of the ideas about the rule of the saint Benedict, rule of the Saint Benedict, right? Okay, so let's continue to read. We only have a few more pages, okay? So, self-sufficient and hard-working. Monte Cassino was a successful monastery, and Benedict's fame spread. Benedict's soon other monasteries were created to follow his rules. Monasteries following Saint Benedict's rules were called Benedictine monasteries. These monasteries tried to be self-sufficient. All right, and let's just scroll down a little bit. How are they self-sufficient? They were trying to get everything that they needed. They had gardens in which they raised their own vegetables. They kept chickens and goats to provide eggs and milk. They made cheese. They also baked their own bread, sewed their own clothing, brewed beer, and made wine. So, looking at this last paragraph, does it seem strange that these deeply religious people drank beer and wine? Does that seem strange to you guys? So, this is a good example of how customs change over time. In the Middle Ages, almost everyone drank small amounts of beer every day. Beer was considered a healthy drink because of the grains used to make it. Um, and then it talked a little bit, and then we learned a little bit more about the meals. That usually just one meal a day with a cold snack in the evening. Meals consisted of bread with eggs, cheese, or fish. So they didn't have a lot of food during the day, just one meal and a snack. Can you guys survive with just one meal and a snack? And then also it talked about how there was no conversation during the meals. So put yourself in the place of a monk. Can you imagine only having one meal and one snack all day, and then also not be able to have any conversations with people during meals? I think we're used to hanging out with friends and family and talking while we eat, but there was no conversation during the meals. But during the meals, one of the monks would read scriptures, and that's our next vocabulary word. So, a scripture is the sacred writings of a religion. So, they would eat together, and one monk would read some passages from scriptures. All right, so continue to read. Benedict also asked monks to follow a shared schedule. When the bell rang for prayer, everyone in the monastery stopped whatever he was doing and went to church. A day in the monastery was divided into 3 general work periods. Monks spent about 6 hours in prayer and 6 hours doing manual work such as gardening, cooking, or sewing. About 4 hours were spent studying and writing. Monks slept 7 to 8 hours a night. Wow, that's really interesting. So they had 6 hours in prayer, 6 hours doing manual work, so that's 12 hours of the day, and then they had spent 4 hours studying. So let's kind of put ourselves in those shoes. So we go to school, or we used to go to school for about 7 hours a day. So that's like doing the prayer, and then 6 hours of manual work. So that means going home and then doing all of your like homework for 6 hours. That's 12 hours. And then, well, I guess you put 4 hours because they did 4 hours of studying, and then 6 hours of gardening, cooking, and sewing, and then going to bed. That's a pretty hard. No, I can't do it. Poor monks. Yeah, that's right. That would be really tough. That would be really tough. But can you imagine all the stuff that you could get done and how much you could learn, right? It would be tough, but studying, for 4 hours and then doing this work like gardening, cooking, and sewing, you could get a lot done in those hours. But it definitely would be tough. All right, so let's continue to read right here. The abbot. The abbot made the rules in the monastery, and all monks had to obey him. So, what is an abbot? Well, it's highlighted in red, so we know, or it's highlighted in red, so that is another vocabulary word. An abbot is the leader of a monastery. So, do you think Saint Benedict was the abbot of his monastery? All right, monks were required to show hospitality to all guests, whether invited or not. They had to treat all the monastery's possessions, whether gardening tools or precious altar pieces, with great care. So they took great care, and it was really important to not misuse anything or not to, be mean to anybody that came to the monastery, whether they were invited or not. So, in that last section, we learned what it meant for monasteries to be self sufficient. So, they gardened, they made their own food, they raised chicken and goats, made their own bread. That's how they were self sufficient. They made their own clothing. Okay, let's continue to read. Missionaries, hospitals, schools, and libraries, all right? Follow along with me. You can either read in your head, listen to me, or read aloud as well if you want to practice reading. So, the rule of Saint Benedict had a great influence not only on Benedict monasteries, but also on other types of monasteries that developed later. This influence extended to convents, and therefore to nuns too. Altogether, these religious institutions had a great impact on Europe's history. Ooh, I think we're about to get into answers for our big question. Monasteries took on the role of supplying missionaries to spread Christianity. Saint Benedict himself was a missionary. Perhaps one of the most famous missionaries was Saint Patrick, who brought the Christian religion to Ireland. Saint Augustine of Canterbury, another famous missionary, brought Christianity to the Anglo Saxons of Britain. Saint Boniface converted many groups of people in what is now Germany. Okay, so what is a missionary? A missionary is a person on a journey for the purpose of spreading a particular religious belief. And fun fact about me, Mr. Gowdy, is I was a missionary for 2 years in Pennsylvania. That was a hard but very fun time. All right, continue to read. During this time, governments provided little or no help for poor people. Saint Benedict believed that each monastery should offer help to the poor and the needy. Thanks to him, over time, more help came from the church. Monks and nuns ran hospitals for the poor and schools for children to train to become monks and nuns. Priests, monks, and nuns demonstrated that caring for the poor was part of their Christian duty. Cool. You have a question? Nice. Yeah, go ahead and ask it. What's your question? I like that. I like that you're asking a question. While you're typing your question, I'm going to grab some water. If you guys need to get up and stretch, that's okay. We've been going for about 20 minutes now, so. Do you still have a question? Okay, perfect. So what kind of scriptures were there? Were they the ones that the monks had? Um, that is a good question. I would say it was either the Bible or the Torah, but let me double check on that. So they had scrolls, yeah, the Bible. There was also called the Book of Kells. So yeah, remember these monks, and we learned last time that there was Christianity, right? So Christianity, so it would have to be um, like the Bible, like the New Testament, the Old Testament. I think the Torah is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. That's a great question. You have a question too, Scotland? Yeah, go ahead. What's your question? Were they all Christians? So what we talked about at the very beginning, Christianity was a new thing during this time. And so some people were Christians, but not everybody believed in Christianity. Um, and I don't now are you asking about the monks? Were all the monks Christian? I don't think it says in our book if all the monks were Christian. We know that they were teaching Christian principles, right? Like being kind to one another. We know that some of these monks, like we just read right here, brought Christianity to people in Britain. I would say yes, these monks were Christian, right? So we learned about the missionaries. If we look at it here, these monks went to spread Christianity, all right? So all these saints, these were all Christians. So I hope that answers your question, Scotland. That's a good question. Nice, laying in bed watching live. Okay, I don't want this to go on too long, so we have 2.5 more pages. All right, so let's continue to read and learn some more about what will help you with your big question. And let's see, we have one more vocabulary word too. Okay, so works of art. One of the most important things that monasteries and convents, excuse me, did was to set up libraries. In the Middle Ages, books were rare and expensive. Some people went their whole lives without ever seeing a book. Every book had to be written was copied by hand. Now that would take a long time. All there were they too bad they didn't have the woodblock printing, right, from China that we learned last quarter. That would have made it a lot easier. So although there was important Islamic libraries in Asia and Africa, in Europe almost all the libraries that existed were in monasteries. Josh is asking, what is a Christian? A Christian is someone that believes in the teachings of Jesus Christ. So that is what a Christian is. Someone that lives and believes those things that are taught by Jesus Christ. So we just read that. Oh, you're good, Scotland. No worries. We just learned that in Europe, almost all the libraries were in the monasteries. So, and this reminds me of Doctor Strange, right? When he's learning, he goes to a monastery and they have a huge library. So that's what you can kind of imagine if you've seen that movie. So monks worked long hours, often by candlelight, copying ancient texts. Most of the texts they copied were much larger than the book you are reading now. Wow, that is big. Think of how long it would take you to copy every word in this book by hand. Monks didn't just copy the words either, they also decorated the first letters of important words. Well, that's kind of nice. Makes it easier to, stand out and be like, oh, you should be focusing on this right here. They also put borders of their manuscripts. And here is our last vocabulary word for this chapter. A manuscript is a book or document written by hand. And they also produced beautiful illustrations. So today, these handwritten books from the Middle Ages are considered valuable works of art. That's really cool. Okay, so nearly all the manuscripts from the early Middle Ages were written in Latin. Even after the fall of Roman Empire, Latin remained the official language in Europe. Any document that had religious, legal, or scholarly significance was written in Latin. For the most part, the only people who knew how to read and write during this time were priests, monks, and nuns. This was largely because the only schools that existed religious schools, and most of the students that were in training for a religious career. People learned about the Bible from listening to a priest, monk, or nun. Right, instead of books Information was passed along in different ways. Most people learned by watching and doing. Children would watch their parents make things, take care of animals, and farm. They grew up learning to do these things. Eventually, they would get married and pass on these skills to their children. So, can you imagine living life like that? If I were your teacher back in these days, I would have to show you how to do everything. We couldn't read these things together. It would all be physical, and I would teach you by showing you rather than reading to you. That'd be pretty interesting. Oh, nice. You're learning about manuscripts and art as well. That's awesome. Way to make the connection, Chloe. All right, so reading was an important activity in many monasteries and convents. And convents is where the nuns live, monasteries is where the monks live. But few people sat and read silently to themselves. Most of the time, one person would read aloud to a group. If people wanted to make an oath or a promise, it was considered more important to say it out loud than to write it down and sign it. Monasteries and convents still exist in the modern world, and monks and nuns continue the work they have done for more than 1,000 years. Today, however, there are thousands of schools, universities, hospitals, and libraries all over the world. So that has definitely changed from back then. It may be hard to imagine how important the work of Benedictine monasteries was to the lives of Europeans. But for hundreds of years, monks and nuns were the teachers, writers, librarians, book publishers, doctors, and nurses for all of Europe. So if we were to go back in time, I would probably be a monk, right? Because I'd be a teacher, and you guys would be, monks and nuns in training because you'd be going to school. And if we had to go to the doctor, well, that doctor would also be a monk and it'd be part of the monastery. But times have changed, right? Okay. All right, well, that is it. Okay, so let's reference the big question again, and I'll scroll up. Gotta go up, up, up. What is going on? Okay, so the big question is, how did St. Benedict's ideas help people in Europe during the Middle Ages? Okay, so some tips to help you, right? So remember Benedictine monasteries or monks, and what did they do? What changes did they make? Think about the book, The Rule of St. Benedict. And what are some things that they established during this time? Can I count that as your lesson? Your sentence? Yeah, for sure. Just use proper capitalization or punctuation, and then just put it in the canvas, all right? Because that way I can see it and then give you extra credit points, all right? So just submit that sentence, and that works perfect, Chloe. Okay, so big question. Remember, Benedictine monks and monasteries. What did those nuns and monks do? And what did they establish during this time? And those are some hints to help you with your big question. So remember to do your big question and remember to do your chapter vocabulary. But that is it for this lesson. And like I said at the beginning, I'm going to be doing basically all my lessons today. So I need to get off and start recording some so that I can have them posted so you can watch them in accordance with the schedule that I posted on Canvas, or you could watch them anytime during this week and get them done. I um, want to urge you to try to stay on top of the work. I already sent out some messages about missing assignments from this last week for history. So try to stay on top. And that way, when Thanksgiving break comes, you can just relax. And then when Christmas break comes, you can be all done with the quarter and not have to worry about making anything up. Okay. Your house is freezing cold, Chloe. Oh no. Go grab a sweatshirt or a blanket. Were there any Catholics? Is that what you're asking? Um, there were a lot of Catholics in the Western Empire. The Roman Empire was we learned last chapter, and let me scroll up really quick to make sure I say this correctly. Um, the Western adopted the Christianity values, and that was the Catholic Church. And then the Eastern was the um, Orthodox Church, right? Yeah, right here. Right here. Catholic, the Western Church, and the Eastern Church was the Orthodox Church. There it is. That's what I was looking for. So you said you're good with schoolwork. There is also, just make sure you're on top of science. There's not a whole lot of science. Science is pretty well spaced out. So it should only take a couple hours to do science at max. And then reading and math and literacy. So those are your 5 subjects. Oh, nice. Adriana's knows Chloe. That's cool. And the heater's not working. Oh no. That's no fun. Okay. Well, um I'm gonna end the lesson, okay, so I can get some more work done and that you guys can get some work done as well, okay? So let's stay on top of it. Reach out to me on Canvas if you have any questions. But this was a great lesson. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I will see you. Um, hopefully, I'm able to do another live lesson this week, but I'm not for sure. If not, I will see you guys in the next video. See you guys. You guys are awesome.